Modern banking revolves around a few key functions which allow banks to provide the core services that are commonly associated with the business of banking. Those functions include accepting deposits, extending loans, determining creditworthiness, currency exchange, record keeping and contracts, and intermediation. Accepting deposits involves the safekeeping of money or valuables and is the primary source of capital acquisition for banks. This capital allows banks to provide loans or financing for later repayment with additional interest, which is the cost of borrowing. Other services include converting one form of money into another or exchanging foreign currencies. Record keeping, using written agreements, ledgers, and the enforcement of loan repayment are critical to the bank's ability to legitimize the services provided. Finally, banks act as intermediaries or middlemen between their customers and other financial institutions. These key functions were not always centered around one service provider. Each one of those services was individually offered until they were all brought together under the auspices of what we know today as a bank. In 2000 BCE, loans were being provided in Assyria, Sumer, and Asia. In early agrarian economies, wealth was measured in grain and livestock, not coins. Farmers deposited grain in state storehouses or with temple authorities. In years of need, they borrowed grain to be repaid after harvest. This was essentially the first loan system. Instead of cash, the commodity itself, grain, was both the collateral and the repayment. This practice established the precedent of credit agreements where one party could borrow now and repay later with interest, sometimes in additional grain. In 1792 BCE, the Code of Hammurabi in Babylonia served as one of the first written legal systems. By regulated lending, interest rates, and collateral, the code set an early guideline for lending. Interest on grain loans were capped. Debts had to be repaid on schedule. Surety rules were defined, like the pledging of land, family members, or property as collateral. This created the legal framework for credit and contracts, much like modern banking laws govern lending practices. In early antiquity, the churches or temples were central to the lives of villagers and countrymen. In 1200 BCE, temple lenders thrived, and currency exchanges were common in Greece, China, and India. Temples were akin to banks in that they were trusted as safe repositories of wealth. People stored valuables there, making them early deposit institutions. Priests or temple authorities loaned out stored wealth, acting as early money lenders. With the rise of coinage and long-distance trade, exchanging one region's currency for another became essential. In Greece, temple treasuries served merchants and pilgrims. The Zhou dynasty in China circulated forms of bronze coins requiring exchange services. Early references in the Vedic texts of India describe moneylenders and usury, or the charging of interest. Here we see the combination of deposits, loans, and foreign exchange services, a true step toward institutional banking. The House of Agibi in Babylonia ran a large private financial house in Babylon. They offered a number of services, including lending money and grain, safeguarding of valuables, currency exchange, property and slave transactions, and managing estates and contracts. This was a private, bank-like institution, closer to a modern commercial bank than temple-based systems. This transition demonstrated how banking shifted from religious/state control to private enterprise, diversifying services for profit. Grain loans indicated the origin of credit and interest. Hammurabi's Code were the first banking laws and regulations. Temple banks and currency exchange offered the first deposits, loans, and international finance, while the House of Agibi demonstrated the first private, profit-driven banking firm with broad services. Together, these laid the foundation for the modern banking system: deposit taking, lending, foreign exchange, regulation, and private financial institutions. North African trade networks were established in the 7th century, which exchanged with sub-Saharan kingdoms until the 15th century. Although there are few to no written records of banking at this time, The implications of such a vast financial network indicates a need for the services that we understand to be central to banking. European banks began with the Lombard merchant bankers from northern Italy, particularly from regions such as Lombardy, roughly during the 12th to 15th centuries. Although originally referring to people from Lombardy, the term Lombard came to broadly describe Italian bankers and moneylenders operating across Europe. After the decline of centralized Roman authority, Italian cities such as Milan, Lucca, Florence, and Genoa began to flourish independently. Their merchants and financiers became critical players in Europe's evolving economy. The Lombards jump-started international banking by setting up branch offices and agents throughout Europe, from Paris to London, Bruges to Avignon, facilitating cross-border finance long before national banks. They were also responsible for papal banking, particularly from Lucca and Siena, handling financial affairs for the papacy, including collecting taxes and managing transfers between Rome and Avignon during the papal schism. The Lombards laid much of the groundwork for modern banking, introducing techniques such as double-entry bookkeeping and international credit systems. However, their prominence began to wane in the 14th century, overtaken by more powerful banking houses like the Medici of Florence. The Bardi and Peruzzi banking families in Italy, Florence, Venice, Genoa, are banks of note in the same era. The Knights Templar played a significant role in the development of banking practices during the medieval period. Established in 1119, the Knights Templar initially focused on protecting pilgrims traveling to the Holy Land. They quickly gained wealth and land, which led to the need for financial management. The Templars introduced several banking practices, including letters of credit, which allowed pilgrims to deposit money in one location and withdraw it in another, reducing the risk of theft, and safe deposits, which offered secure storage for valuables. The Templars became one of the most powerful financial institutions in Europe, lending money to monarchs and managing large estates. Their banking operations included financing crusades and military campaigns, engaging in trade and commerce across Europe and the Middle East. The Templar Order was disbanded in 1312, largely due to political and financial pressures from European monarchs. Their banking practices influenced modern banking systems, particularly in terms of credit and financial transactions. The Rothschild family is one of the most influential financial dynasties in European history. The dynasty was founded by Mayer Amschel Rothschild in 1798. He built his fortune through currency exchange, government finance, and trade, and it is seen as a precursor to investment banks. Mayer Amschel sent his 5 sons to major European capitals to establish a pan-European banking network: Amschel in Frankfurt, Salomon in Vienna, Nathan in London, Karl in Naples, and James in Paris. The Rothschilds gained immense wealth financing Britain and its allies, particularly Nathan Rothschild, who played a central role in financing the war effort and post-war reconstruction. They provided sovereign loans to nearly every major European power, including Austria, Prussia, France, and Britain. The family invested heavily in railways, mining, and industrial enterprises, becoming key players in Europe's modernization. The Rothschilds were not just bankers. They were architects of European finance, operating at the intersection of commerce, politics, and diplomacy for over a century. Their story is both emblematic of Jewish success in a hostile Europe and a case study in the evolution of global capitalism. Central banks are commonly established to service governments and commercial banks. From 1609 to 1913, European central banks flourished. In 1609, the Bank of Amsterdam, also known as the Amsterdam Wissel Bank, was established in the Dutch Republic and is often considered to be a forerunner to modern central banks. In 1668, the model of the Whistle Bank as a state bank was adapted throughout Europe, including the Bank of Sweden. By 1694, that model was adapted in England with the Bank of England, which financed the government and secured debt by taxation of the British people. In 1695, the Bank of Scotland was established. This was the period that laid the foundations of the central banking financial system used today,